step up a little bit, except for you, right? Are you running this?
I'm running this.
Okay.
Good morning. First, I'd like to welcome Congressman Adrian Smith, our 3rd District Representative. Congressman Smith is no stranger to Southern Valley, as he first came here about 10 years ago to one of our football practices. Congressman Smith was overwhelmingly re-elected in 2016 and currently serves on the Committee on Ways and Means. Second, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. We have all of our junior, senior high students in attendance, but we'll only be taking questions from 7th and 8th graders. I asked Congressman Smith and the other candidates to come to Southern Valley so that our students can interact with the candidates that want to represent our area in Congress and learn the political process firsthand instead of from a book. Let's give Congressman Smith a warm Southern Valley welcome.
Well, good morning. It's great to be here. I feel like this podium is kind of far away, so I'm going to come down there if that's all right. And I just appreciate the opportunity to interact with students, interact with the communities across the 3rd district. No, the 3rd district is 75 counties. So we have Mountain Time Zone out in the Panhandle. We have Missouri River area of northeast Nebraska and southeast Nebraska, so a lot of counties, a lot of territory to cover, but I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And certainly I was here on the football field as was mentioned. Also I've been in the classroom a time or two here at Southern Valley as well. Mr. Epp and I are friends from several years back, and so sorry he isn't here today, but other duties call, right? Well, like I said, it's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the Ways and Means Committee. We work on taxes, we work on trade policy, we work on health care, we work on Social Security. Now, how many of you have had a summer job recently? Okay, several of you. How many of you pay taxes, just incidentally? How many of you pay taxes? Okay. How many of you get an allowance? Okay, a few of you. Now, do you save all of that allowance? So you probably spend your allowance. If you spend your allowance on clothing, you pay taxes. Not federal taxes, but local and state taxes. If you spend your money in a restaurant, you pay some taxes. If you spend your money on video games, you pay some taxes. But what I like to do is point out to folks how important it is that we get the right tax policy as best we can. When the government takes money from you, we want that money to be spent wisely, because when we talk about the power of government to take your money, that's pretty serious. And it's things, we try to deal with things in Washington. We've got a huge debt that we need to address. That's a tax on future generations if we don't handle that appropriately. And we've got a ways to go in terms of addressing that debt. But I get asked a lot about student loans and access to kind of college education. I might just briefly tell you that more than likely you will have the opportunity to take out more in student loans than you need for that tuition, room, and board. Be very careful, because you'll have to pay that back with plus interest, and that in some ways is a tax. As you go to college, perhaps you'll be charged tuition. I would say that's a bit of a tax, and as decision makers increase tuition, I would hope that you get as involved saying, hey, don't do that, as much as constituents tell me that they don't want to pay higher taxes, whether it's property taxes, whether it's income taxes, whether it's sales tax. So we do have, in my opinion, fundamental functions of government that we need to fund, whether it's making sure you have educational opportunities in various forms, whether it's having roads and highways for us to travel on. That's necessary for our economy and just getting to work, getting to our jobs. That's important. And so sometimes we lose sight of these fundamental functions of government. Funding our military. We had a bill last week that was really important for paying our troops more, for making sure that they have the right training, for making sure that they have the right equipment. It's concerning to me when we have training accidents in our military, and there has been the loss of life, and I would hope that we can avoid that and prevent that moving forward by affording our men and women in uniform the resources that they need. And it's not just a paycheck, but it's also that training and that equipment, as I mentioned. So we have a lot going on in Washington. I think we've made some good progress with better tax policy than we had last year at this time. In fact, we weren't even anticipating the initial good news of tax reform triggering pay raises, bonuses, better retirements, better pensions. That has already been taking place. More than 300 companies have announced that they're taking the tax relief that they were given through our tax reform bill and basically giving it to their employees. That's a good sign. Now, another reason why we did tax reform is to be more competitive as a country around the world. We were seeing U.S. companies leaving our country to go to other countries with lower tax rates. That's not good for us. Ultimately, we lose tax dollars when that happens. But also, there were U.S. companies who have done well selling their products to other economies, in other economies around the world. Apple is a good example of that. Apple has been doing well, making profits in these other countries, but then they would leave that cash, leave those profits in those other countries instead of bringing those profits back here, where they would have had to pay the highest tax rate in the world. Even President Obama said we needed to be more competitive with these tax rates on the corporate side. So we changed our tax policy at the end of last year, and now we hear that Apple is bringing billions of dollars into our economy. They made an announcement the other day they plan to hire 20,000 new employees. That's good for us. That's good for America. That's good for opportunities, hopefully, as you, not that you have to work for Apple to have that opportunity, but that there would be more options for you economically as you pursue your own future. You know, I get asked oftentimes, what's my number one responsibility? And I believe that my number one responsibility is to do everything I can to ensure that you have an opportunity. Now, I can't pick the right outcome for each and every one of you, but if I can work to make sure that you have good opportunity, I think that we are all better off, and that you will be able to pursue your future better, more effectively than the government trying to pick what's good for you, whether it's your health care plan, whether it's your job, whether it's the training you might pursue after high school, whether it's in the trades or whether it's a four-year degree, whatever the case might be. I think we want to focus on empowering individuals through opportunity. I also often get asked what should be done to increase wages. Well, I think the best way to increase wages is to have an economy, a strong enough economy, where when you apply for a job or different jobs, you have more than one offer, and you can pick between those job offers what's best for you. It might be one wage that's higher than the other. It might be different job benefits that are better in one job than the other, unrelated to the wage. But there will be pressure when there's competition, and we're seeing this already. There will be upward movement of wages when employers are competing for employees. That is a dynamic that we are working on right now, and right now we have millions of Americans kind of on the economic sidelines, and we want to get them back on the economic playing field in a way that's best for them as individuals, best for their families, best for communities, and ultimately that can even help taxpayers as we do focus on the issues we need to face moving forward. So I know you have questions. The 7th and 8th graders have questions, that is. So I'm happy to take questions and hear what's on your mind, since we do have limited time here today. So who's first?
I'm Hannah. Who was the biggest role model for you when you were younger?
Who was the biggest role model for me when I was younger? Well, I would say my grandfather has been a tremendous role model for me. I wish he were still around. And he was a hardworking man who helped others, who not politically involved necessarily, but he was always civically minded. And we could have some great conversations, and we could disagree on things, but we still love each other. And he happened to be a staunch Democrat. And I would say I've been a staunch Republican, a conservative Republican ever since 4th grade when Ronald Reagan ran against Jimmy Carter. My grandpa happened to like Jimmy Carter. But he got me to thinking more and thinking independently, and ultimately deciding for myself that thinking and governance from a conservative point of view, I think, is better for America. And there are other role models. Politically speaking, President Reagan is my political hero for the way he governed, and I find him especially inspiring. And so Virginia Smith is someone else I've looked up to. She had my job from 1974 to 1990. So when I was your age, she was our Congresswoman. She delivered great service, and no relation. Our last names are the same, but we're not related. And so just different people in different roles I look to as role models and as folks I seek to pattern my service after. So, thank you. Yes?
Hi, my name is Coy. What is the main reason why you want to run for office?
The main reason why I want to run for office is because I'm concerned about the future of our country. And certainly I have voted on things when I was a state senator and even city council, and I voted, cast votes as a member of Congress now. But I'm still not doing my job if I'm not thinking about what we can do for our country for the future. Now, we've made a little bit of progress, like I said, with tax reform, for pursuing more economic freedom, so that the American people can keep more of their money and stimulate the economy without having to give it to the government, and then the government picks where the government wants to spend money. And so I think that if we think more about the future, I mean, when you guys have jobs and you have to pay into Social Security, we want to make sure that you get those benefits back as well when you qualify for those benefits a few years down the road. And these right now, the long-term strength of Social Security needs to be addressed. And so it's things like that, though, that involve learning from history, the history of our country, learning from history and applying that moving forward to the future, so that we can see a stronger country moving forward. Thanks. Yes.
Hi, my name is Isaac, and I was wondering what do you want to improve for Nebraska?
What do I want to improve for Nebraska? Well, a growing economy is what I think is very important. I would compare the economy somewhat to riding a bicycle. And the bicycle, you can move forward and make a little bit of progress, but you're not making as much progress as if you've got a strong economy and you're pedaling the bicycle, and you can go up a hill, you can take the curves, whatever the case is. Now the economy can still kind of be there with the bicycle standing still, and your feet are on the ground, but you're not getting very far. And so when we can focus on really a more thriving economy, I think we're on the right track right now. We've made, I think, some great progress lately. But it boils down to that economic freedom, and so that you as individuals can decide what to do with your money, rather than the government insisting that they take it from you, thinking that they can make better decisions. I mean, look at this healthcare mess that we have. President Obama, he said, that every household would save an average of $2,500 per year on their health insurance premium. That hasn't been happening, let me tell you. And you probably know, talking to your parents and neighbors perhaps, of how expensive healthcare, how much more expensive health insurance has become since the federal government got more involved. The pattern is that the more the government has gotten involved in healthcare, the more expensive it has become. We need to take a step back, and we did that with repealing the individual mandate relating to Obamacare. Repealing that is a step in the right direction, and we certainly have more work to do. Thank you.
My name's Matthew, and what made you run for Congress?
What made me run for Congress? Well, my concern for the future of our country is one of those reasons. And actually, my thinking of my grandfather, he had passed before I was a candidate for Congress, but he would always get me thinking of what's happening around the country, what's happening around the world. How can I be a part of the solution? And this day and age, it's much easier to just identify what the problem is. It takes a little more work and a little more diligence to identify the solution to the problem. And so I always try to do everything that I can to focus on solutions rather than just repeating what the problem is, and hopefully bringing about more freedom and opportunity along the way for the people of Nebraska and the American people in general. Thanks. Yes.
Hi, I'm Brianna. What's your stance on net neutrality?
Net neutrality. Net neutrality has been a plan for the government to regulate the internet. We saw great growth in terms of the use of the internet and the application around the country without the government regulating it. And I think that's pretty instructive. It's been an interesting debate as we've heard advocates for and against net neutrality. I side on less government intrusion. And so I think that we can and would see more growth, more options for consumers ultimately with the government less involved. So I'm opposed. Yes?
Hi, my name's Hunter. What do you think about Donald Trump's tweets?
What do I think about Donald Trump's tweets? Well, in this modern communication age, I think President Trump has been able to use social media to get his message out. And I think that is information for the American people, and that is healthy. And I think it's important that we communicate in various forms, so not just tweeting, or not just Twitter, or not just Facebook, but to really acknowledge that we want to have all forms of communication, including communication one-on-one, face-to-face, like we are here today. And I don't think we can expect the computer or text messaging to replace the personal communication that we should try to maintain for our communities or our families. And so I think that certainly the president has been very effective and certainly has the right to use Twitter, but also the personal meetings as well. I have had the opportunity to meet with the president on a couple of occasions, to talk about tax policy, to talk about trade, how important trade is for agriculture, because we want to send our products around the world. And so those are opportunities that the president has used to also have the face-to-face, the one-on-one communication as well, in addition to tweeting. So, thanks.
Hi, my name's Kalia, and I was wondering, when you were younger, what did you want to be?
When I was younger, what did I want to be when I grow up? To be honest with you, I didn't see myself as a member of Congress. I saw myself being involved in the community and ultimately private business and some entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ideas. But I started out in education, and I appreciate that opportunity. I learned a lot working in education. I didn't have my own classroom per se, but I worked for the Educational Service Unit and working with teachers in western Nebraska. And then I felt called to public service, and so that's why I ran for city council, and then served a full term there. I ran for state senator, served 2 terms there, the limit there, and there came an open seat in Congress, and some folks in Grand Island and other places encouraged me to run for Congress. And so I thought, I have some things to offer and a passion for service in general. I would say that service, I wasn't adamant that it had to be in the House of Representatives, but I appreciate the opportunity to serve. And if all of us can really focus on service, I think we can be more effective in the policies that we help formulate.
I'm Colby, and are you a Huskers fan?
I am a Huskers fan. I'm a University of Nebraska alum, even though there are more Husker fans than there are alumni. Go Big Red. Go Huskers. Are you a Husker fan? Okay. Very good. Yes.
Hi, I'm Becca. And if you weren't currently in Congress, what would be your main goal in life?
What would be my main goal in life? Well, I acquired a new title 5 months ago yesterday, and that's the title called Dad. So my wife and I, we have a little 5-month-old, and I take that title very seriously. It's one that I actually think helps me do this job even better. And so I think that those priorities, so certainly supporting family in various ways. But, you know, it's hard for me to keep the focus on the job that I have right now and think, what else would I be doing that could be kind of a distraction. But I believe that there are opportunities in different forms that could be pursued. But I've been focusing on doing my job well that I've had for a little while now, and hopefully we'll continue to have that. It's just a 2-year term. So I always try to focus, though, on high-quality service and interacting with people who send me to Washington to represent them. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Aubrey. What is your favorite thing about being in office?
My favorite thing about being in office, I would say when I have the opportunity to engage in settings like this, or when groups come to Washington, especially younger students, when they come to Washington and I get to share a little bit of my experience with them, I will say that one of the coolest experiences of my time was when President Bush was giving his last State of the Union speech. My one guest for that evening up in the gallery was my high school government teacher. And after that took place, after the speech was over, my teacher and I, we were hanging out in the hallway as the president was leaving. And I got to introduce my favorite teacher to the President of the United States, and the President took a few steps back and said, "Great profession, and you ought to be proud." So being able to interact like that with people who have helped me along the way, or certainly people I represent in Washington, I appreciate that opportunity. And it's just one of the cooler things that I'm able to do, and certainly it inspires me to serve as I get to interact with Nebraskans and others. Thanks. Yes.
What was one of the most difficult problems you had to face while you were in office?
One of the most difficult problems. Well, we've got a big dilemma right now, and that is the pressure to fund various programs and limited resources to pay for it. And we have a looming debt. And just last week, there was a tough bill that we had. There was a provision that I worked really hard on that many Nebraskans told me they needed, a tax provision. I had, for example, a small independent grain elevator operator tell me that if we didn't get this done, he may go out of business. Others were sharing similar information like that. So that was a provision in last week's bill, but there were some parts of the bill that I didn't like. But I believe that my constituents wanted me to vote for that, and then continue to address these challenges that we are facing, given the $20 trillion debt that we are facing. Now, some would say that there's so much military spending that's the big driver of our debt. That's not necessarily the case. And when it's a combination of things that are driving our debt, and we need to address those. And there are a lot of programs kind of on autopilot. It's called mandatory funding, mandatory spending. We need to work on that. And those mandatory spending programs are what are really increasing our debt more so than others. And we need to address that moving forward. Thanks.
My name is Camden, and I was wondering, who do you think your toughest competition is?
Who do I think my toughest competition is? Well, every 2 years I stand for election, and I don't really get caught up too much in the details of what the opponents are doing. I just focus on my job and focusing on running a positive campaign and focusing, like I said, on ideas for the future. Because I serve because I care about the future of our country. And I think sometimes there can be efforts to distract, and I don't want to lose my focus on doing a good job for the people of the 3rd District. So, thanks. Yes, sir.
My name is Mitchell. How will you help small towns grow?
Say that again.
How we help small towns grow.
How do we help small towns grow? You know, one of the most frequent requests that I get from constituents across the 3rd District as it relates to the federal government is to be left alone. You know, a lot of folks, especially in the livestock business, they see intervention by the government that makes their job more difficult. It makes intervention by the federal government in our schools makes teachers' jobs more difficult. And I think that especially it hits smaller communities hard. And so I think getting the federal government out of the way can make a better difference. That's why I've worked to get rid of regulations that especially impact smaller communities. And this notion that the federal government would control all waters of the U.S. when so much of that is much more appropriately addressed by the local level. So reducing regulations, we're looking at a farm bill moving forward. I think it's important that we have a good crop insurance program in our next farm bill, and we continue some of the successes of crop insurance as we do focus on the future. So, thanks.
Hi, I'm Sierra. Do you consider yourself a career politician?
Do I consider myself a career politician? Well, it is a full-time job. In fact, it's more than a full-time job. And the fact is, I appreciate the opportunity to serve, and the fact that I'm back and forth to Nebraska nearly every weekend from Washington. That's, like I said, it's more than a full-time job. I don't really consider it a career. And that's because as a new father, as a husband to my wife Andrea, there are the personal things that really motivate me, so I don't consider what I do every day to really be a career. And ultimately, the private sector is out there, and like I said, it's just a 2-year term, so I take things 2 years at a time and focus on doing a good job with what I'm currently doing. So, thanks. Yes?
Hi, I'm Jessica. What's your opinion on President Trump's wall?
What is my opinion on President Trump's wall on the border? I assume you're talking about that. Well, along the border, we already have somewhat of a wall in parts, and I think that extending that, I think, can be effective, and I support that effort. I also believe that we should look at current technology to address border security as well. Immigration as a whole, as an entire issue, we've got some work to do. Now, for example, some people in Washington just want to solve the DACA issue. And I think there are a lot of folks in Washington, President Trump said, let's address DACA and let's do other immigration reforms as well to make sure that we don't find ourselves in the DACA situation again in the future. So that's why my great-grandparents were immigrants, German-Russian immigrants, so they were Germans who had been living in Russia. They came across the ocean, came into the U.S. through Ellis Island, a very common scenario for a lot of Nebraska families, and ultimately settled in western Nebraska, working as migrant laborers in the fields. And I'm proud of that heritage. Without their action back then, I wouldn't have the opportunity to exist today, let alone the opportunity to serve for the 3rd District. And so, but that said, immigration, the issue in general, it's become so bureaucratic that it has actually encouraged more illegal immigration. And we need an immigration system that's based on the rule of law, that people understand, that someone wishing to pursue the American dream can still do so without having to hire a lawyer and spend several thousands of dollars and trying to navigate this bureaucracy. We could do a lot better with our immigration system, and that includes strengthening the border and coming up with better policies that ultimately uphold the rule of law. Thanks.
Should we plant apple trees in cities so that the homeless can have something to eat?
Should we plant apple trees in cities so the homeless can eat? That is an option, and I would hope that as communities address the needs of their local communities, that they would feel empowered to meet the needs of local communities. I would say that there doesn't need to be a federal program necessarily to force the local community to do that. And I would hope that, like I said, that individuals would feel empowered to help their neighbors. And we've got some nutrition issues that exist today. I hear from students who don't like the federal regulations in the school lunch program, where active students actually find themselves hungrier than they used to because the federal government got more involved. And again, I don't think we need to have so much federal intervention as it relates to local communities. But certainly, you raise the issue of helping neighbors, and I would hope that individuals would be empowered to do so. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Elliot. What have you done for the 3rd District to get reelected?
What have I done for the 3rd District? Well, the tax reform bill that I worked literally for years on, I think is already helping the 3rd District. I've introduced bills and gotten some passed in the House to help the 3rd District, whether it is helping, say, single moms achieve more independence and self-sufficiency, or it is introducing other legislation to get the government out of the way of the citizens. And so agriculture issues, I've been working on trade issues a lot, helping increase the exports from Nebraska. I appreciate the opportunity. The pork producers, for example, awarded me their national award a few years ago because of my work to help increase the exports of their product to other countries. And we're focusing on this right now. Trade is really important because for U.S. agriculture, we grow so efficiently that our products here, whether it's crops or say corn that's fed to our cattle and then we can sell that beef around the world, we produce more than we consume in America. Now, that means we need to take these products and sell them around the world. 96% of the world's population, they live in another country. They live outside the United States. And that's why trade is such an important issue, not only for U.S. agriculture, but other sectors of our economy. And the fact that we focus on more exports, that's what I've been working on. We've made some progress, but I've been continuing to work on making sure that NAFTA continues to help American agriculture, the trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. That's important as we do move forward, as well as other trade opportunities that I've been working on. There's some other things too that I could list, but in the interest of time, we'll take some more questions here. So, yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Trevor. Where do you stand on consolidated schools?
Where do I stand on consolidated schools? Well, I want local communities to decide for themselves. I went to a small rural school growing up, and I appreciated the opportunity for that setting. Then in 9th grade, I went, so to speak, into town to school, and a little larger school. But I want schools to have local options, to be locally governed. And Southern Valley here formed because communities came together, because they felt that was the best thing to do. I respect that. And certainly I don't think the federal government needs to get involved in saying how big a school district should or shouldn't be. And I don't even think the state should say how big a district should or shouldn't be. So I appreciate your question. Thanks. Yes?
Hi, I'm Shay. What do you think the future holds for small businesses in Nebraska?
What is the future for small businesses in Nebraska? Well, I have a small business. I opened a storage facility, a mini storage facility back before I got elected to Congress, and I can appreciate the demands and the stresses of small business. Property tax, for example, is a huge concern. I saw a property tax increase. I'm seeing a property tax increase that concerns me. Now, that's not a federal issue necessarily, at least not directly. And so I think the overall tax burden, though, we want, now obviously we need to fund our fundamental functions of government, pay our military so they can protect our freedom. But ultimately, there are regulations that exist, I would say from the local level all the way up to the federal level, that I hope that all leaders will really review, take another look at, so that small businesses, or businesses of any size, quite frankly, can thrive and see opportunity to hire more employees, or that an employee, working for someone else would feel the freedom to start a new business. Because to me, that is a great opportunity where someone would feel the freedom to innovate and come up with a new idea and hopefully do well financially as a result, rather than feeling they just have to work for someone else as their only option. So small businesses are really the heart of our economy, and I say that from personal experience, and I say that certainly from interacting with many Nebraskans across the 3rd District. So thank you. Is that it for the questions, or are there more questions? I'm happy to take more questions. Okay.
What are your ideas on gun control?
My ideas on gun control. Well, I will acknowledge the Second Amendment and also tell you that I support the Second Amendment. I believe it is a freedom afforded us for multiple reasons, but for good reasons as well. And the tragedies that have occurred, say in Florida most recently, in a school, I would hope that we can have the conversations we need to have interactions and thoughtful exchange of ideas to prevent that from happening again. Now there's a pattern of these tragedies that have taken place, and that's the mental instability of these shooters. Whether it is in a classroom in Connecticut, a school in Florida, a church in South Carolina, a movie theater in Colorado, or the practice baseball field in Washington, D.C., when my colleagues were out there practicing baseball one early morning, and a gunman came and attempted to take the lives of my colleagues. And that hit close to home for me. I mean, I wasn't there that morning. I had been to baseball practice on other occasions. So, and working with these folks every day, that was a new scenario that I think got our attention, certainly. Now, as we do move forward, though, on how to prevent, I think mental health is one thing. It's the primary thing we need to address. Taking guns away from law-abiding individuals won't solve anything. When you look at what happened in Florida, when the shooter was identified as a danger to others and nothing was done about it, we need to get to the bottom of that and hope that something like that doesn't ever occur again. Because that certainly makes it seem much more preventable when we learn those facts. And I think there are more facts to learn about that, or the concert in Las Vegas. There seems to be more information that we need on that as well. So it's a serious topic, and the rush to just take guns away from people, I don't think is effective, and I think it violates the Second Amendment to our Constitution. Thank you. Yes.
Are you willing to work with Democrats to benefit the 3rd District?
Am I willing to work with Democrats to benefit the 3rd District? Yes. I think I look at policies aside from party. I want to look at policies that, like I said, empower individuals to make the decisions that they need to make, to pursue the freedom that they want to pursue. And sometimes I agree with Democrats, other times I don't. Now, I choose to be a Republican because, generally speaking, the Republican Party, as the conservative party, I believe is the way of the future. I believe that the parties, sometimes they can get a little too involved in a partisan basis, but when I study the priorities of the Democratic Party, for example, I just don't think those policies work very well. And but like I said, my grandfather, who inspired me to serve more than any other individual, he was a staunch Democrat, but we could have good conversations, and sometimes agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, we still love each other, and we could still embrace freedom for our country. He was a World War II vet. His stories about serving in World War II, another thing that motivates me even today. So I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with someone and discuss issues, even though we might disagree on how to resolve something. Oftentimes, what we find out is take the nation's debt and how we address that. I would say both Republicans and Democrats want to reduce that debt. varying levels of intensity. But we disagree on how we get there. So, but that competition, the competition of ideas makes us better. And I think whether it's on the basketball court, the football field, or in the House chamber in Washington, D.C. in general, competing ideas are what our country is about. You know, our country was founded on disagreement. The Declaration of Independence, that was rooted in disagreement. Our founders, many of them didn't like each other, and that, yet they still came together to give us ultimately the Constitution that we benefit from every single day. So regardless of party, let's focus on solutions moving forward, and we can be better off for it. Thank you.
Because of rising threats from North Korea, should we do nuke drills?
The threats of North Korea, I think, are serious. I also think we've made more progress lately, it sounds, than before. I think that to keep our world safer, certainly to keep our country safer, that our missile defense system can do a lot of that. I think it's important. You know, back long before you guys were around, President Reagan was in office, and he proposed the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI. A lot of people made fun of him for coming up with this plan that our technology would prevent a nuclear attack. And I'm glad that he started that back then, because that puts us on a footing today where we can prevent a nuclear attack from a country that doesn't like us, and ultimately protect America, but also be able to prevent the damage that would spill over into other parts of the world as well. Thank you. Yes?
I'm Colby. How have you helped reduce our national debt?
How have I helped reduce the national debt? The issue is very, very multifaceted, I will say. But when you look at spending, we have done various things that have shrunk the deficit. The deficit is the annual difference between what we take in and what we pay out. That's varied a little bit under various circumstances. But I think when you look at the pressures that we put on spending when the Republicans took over the House in 2011, we've made a positive difference. Now we have a long way to go, and that's why I focus on the future, and that is, like I said earlier, the mandatory spending. We need to look at that. Now, we see Medicare Part D, for example, that's a prescription drug plan for senior citizens that has been very effective in terms of giving consumers choices and making sure that there's competition out there, and that ultimately holds down the cost. And we need to take some of those market-based principles and apply those to other parts of mandatory spending that are out there. Now, Social Security is really separate. I view that separately, and that has a few things that can be adjusted to bring that into long-term solvency, so that when you pay in today, you can expect to get benefits down the road. But I would encourage everyone, regardless of age, to think more about your own financial future and plan for it. Now, I will tell you that even with long-term solvency, Social Security is not a comfortable source of retirement income. It was never intended to be, so always keep that in mind. Think about the future as you save money and pursue financial opportunities. Always think about the future, and that hopefully there will be less dependence on the federal government, and not just by you as individuals, but across the country, so that individuals, like I said before, feel empowered and will feel the independence and the self-sufficiency, because that ultimately provides more opportunity for others as well. Thanks. Yes?
What do you think about Americans' ability or inability to gain health care?
Well, we don't have as much time for me to discuss that as I would like to, because, like I mentioned earlier, the more the government's gotten involved, the more expensive healthcare has become. Obamacare kind of shifted around who pays for what. The other day, it was brought up that an individual told her congressman that she didn't have coverage for her maternity care. And here, that was a mandate that President Obama pushed for, that coverage would be there. Well, what we call the co-pays and the deductibles were so high that exceeded what the cost of maternity care was, and so this person had to come up with probably the first $10,000 of treatment, and exceeded what the bill was entirely. So basically, she didn't have that coverage that even President Obama said should be mandated. So there were all sorts of promises made that just haven't worked, financially or otherwise. And I am proud to say that I have a great working relationship with the hospitals all around the 3rd District, and I've introduced legislation on their behalf. We've made a little bit of progress on that front as well. We do see some regulations. But fact of the matter is, we want individuals to have more choices, and I think the action we took at the end of last year with repealing the individual mandate will actually allow insurance plan providers to be more innovative in their offerings and ultimately offer their customers more options to choose from. Thank you. Good question. Yes?
What's your opinion on arming teachers?
What is my opinion on arming teachers? Well, I believe that a teacher as a professional, if the teacher wants to have the training to have a weapon, that the teacher should be able to do that. I don't think that guns should be forced on anyone, whether it's in the classroom, in the school, anywhere. I don't think that a firearm should be forced on anyone. But if someone who wants to have the proper training to have that, should have that opportunity. Thanks. What do you guys think? I want to know what you think too. Does anyone want to speak up on what you think should be done to prevent what happened in Florida, for example, on the gun issue? What do you think some of the solutions are? And feel free to just speak up if you want, and you don't have to go to the microphone. I can try to paraphrase what you're saying as well. What do you guys think? There's kind of a hand. Go ahead. No? Okay. Well, let teachers, okay. So for the local school board to have that decision, I think that's a good answer. Yes? Metal detectors in school, I think we're starting to see some of that. Yes? That's okay. Okay. What if the teacher becomes upset? Okay, I appreciate that. Okay. Yes. Right, so more regulations you don't think will prevent criminals from getting the firearms. That's a good point. I mean, Washington, D.C. is one of the most restrictive cities in America as it relates to gun ownership, and there's still a lot of guns that are used by criminals. And Washington, D.C. is not known to be a safe community, and I think that's a pretty accurate reflection of the reality of regulations that don't work. Yes? Okay, so teachers having self-defense training without the use of firearms is what you're recommending? Okay, either way. Okay. Yes, sir. So security available in schools that would be able to use deadly force, okay? For janitors, since they know their way around the school and have keys to all the rooms, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yes? Sorry? More police involved in schools, okay? There's been a lot of discussion in the Florida situation that there was a police officer on site that various opinions of what could have been done or should have been done. But that's an interesting scenario. As we have been seeing more police officers in schools of late, I don't know the exact statistics of how that has been effective or not, but I think it will certainly probably get a lot more discussion moving forward. Does Is there another hand? Yes? More security? Okay. All right. What about other issues? What do you think is the number one issue that you face as young people as you are concerned about your future? Running out of money personally, not being able to pay for things, so a good paying job perhaps would be a concern that you have for the future. Okay. What else? Yeah? Tariffs on imports, you're concerned about the tariffs? Okay, that's a hot topic these days. Now, what's interesting is, there are a variety of opinions. I have concerns about tariffs, especially because on other products coming into our country. That tends to make them more expensive for the American people to buy. But also I'm concerned about other countries when they say, oh, well, we're not going to buy as many U.S. agriculture products as a result. So that gets me concerned. But I also want to say that a lot of the discussion we've been having triggered by the tariff proposal a few weeks ago, and the renegotiation of our trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. The fact that you bring this up, I think, is a good sign that we are having more thoughtful conversations on trade policy. I mean, I will tell you that tariffs are not usually the topic brought up as I visit with students in schools around the 3rd District. And so I think it's a good sign that these discussions are taking place and that we can have an exchange of ideas. I mean, I don't like it when China engages in unfair trade practices, and that's what President Trump is trying to resolve. And I would hope that we can target our effort toward countries with these unfair trade practices without harming our relationships with other countries with whom we have positive, strong trade relationships where they buy a lot of our products and we want to sell them even more. Let's work on that as we do move forward. Let me just toss out another trade issue, just because I think it's an item of the future and you might find it a little bit interesting. So if you go online and you find you want to buy something from a website that's based, a company based in Canada, you can buy, as an American, up to $800 of that product and not have to pay the trade tax, a duty, on that coming across the border. Okay, up to $800. Now, if a Canadian gets on an American website to buy a product, they can only buy about $20 US worth of product before that duty, that tax, is imposed. So $800 and $20, that's way out of balance. And that's something that President Trump has been bringing up. This is an issue that I brought up as well, because it puts us at an unfair disadvantage. It actually hurts Canadian consumers who might want to buy something on Amazon, but have to pay an extra tax to do so. So again, I mention that because it's kind of a tangible thing, and I think we'll hear more about it in the future. And it's an example of an imbalance that we need to address. And so that's what I've been working on, and hope to have the opportunity to continue to work on that. So I'm humbled to hear your questions, to hear your ideas, hear your concerns. It's my job to take your ideas back to Washington, increase the awareness among my colleagues of what's happening in the 3rd District of Nebraska, as we not only help feed our country, but as we help feed the world and provide opportunities for our folks here at home. So I don't want to take anything for granted, and certainly I want you to know how much I would appreciate your vote. For those of you, how many are registered to vote? Okay, a good number of hands, especially among the teachers. This is good. But certainly the students as well. I remember, like it's yesterday, the opportunity to register to vote for my first time, and it was a pretty cool feeling. You know, one thing I did as a state senator, I worked to make sure that 16 and 17-year-olds, even though they're not old enough to register to vote, but they actually are qualified to work at the polls. You used to have to be 18 to do that, But I introduced a bill, and we got the policy passed with another bill that allows 16 and 17-year-olds the opportunity to work at the polls on election day, not just because you might be able to skip school for the day, but for you to really get more involved in our electoral process. And sometimes we take for granted what our system is and how we got here, and I hope we don't do that moving forward. Whether it's the Russians trying to undermine our election or other distractions from our elections, this is an important topic that I hope that we can all rally around and uphold the integrity of our elections moving forward, because it is really the centerpiece of our freedom, and that we should work together regardless of party to make sure that we've got a strong electoral system. So my time has run out, but again, I appreciate the opportunity to take your questions, to hear your ideas. They don't have to stop here. You can continue to let me know what's on your mind. You can find me online, whether it's on the official side and to get me your ideas, or whether it's on the campaign side. Please know that I would appreciate your vote, and I'll just close by quoting that famous Nebraskan who says, "Get her done." Thank you very much.
Well, let's hear it one more time for Congressman Smith. Seventh page leaders, please stay. We'll get a quick picture with Congressman Smith. The rest of you go to third period. Third period.
Hey, what is she in?